I can't think of a better way to spend Sunday is to share my work with you all. I decided, I was going through my work to bring over here, excuse me, and I have like at least as many more at home that I could have brought, but what I decided to do is to give you a sample of the type of work that I do. And if you notice, there's a selection on one wall that's sort of one type of quilt, then you have another in here, and then another over on this side. It's because I do like to work in a variety of ways. So I'm going to start with talking about the work that's on the far wall. The very first quilt on the left is the brand new quilt. I just finished it for my grandson's 15th birthday. All made with denim, and the blue plaid is my dad's bathrobe, so it's kind of a cool thing. And if you notice, there's some pockets in there. And when I give it to him, there'll be little $5 bills tucked in all the pockets. I think there's 5 or 6 pockets. I'm not going to tell him. I just let him discover it. I try to give my grandkids some sort of quilt every 5 years. I made a huge mistake saying that because my oldest grandson last year turned 20, and his one brother and his cousin turned 10, so all within a month, so they didn't get quilts. They didn't get quilts. But anyway, it was a simple, all with denim and a few pieces of other fabric. That one is tied off. I don't know if anybody's worked with denim, but it's really, really heavy. And to try to pull that through my sewing machine probably would have hurt me, So I tied it all off, and the little doodads you see are all little pieces of fabric that I hand embroidered around. I'm working on more handwork these days, so it was a way to practice, in front of the TV. So, all right. So the pieces that you see on this wall are all made with a reverse applique technique. I developed this technique quite a long time ago, and I originally did some reverse applique with tucking over all the ends, and I got done with it, and I'm like, it's never going to happen again, because that takes forever, and I really don't like that tedious work. So what I decided to do is I decided to start working with raw edge reverse applique, and what I mean by that is I layer 2 pieces of fabric together. I sew the shape, sewing them together, then I cut the top layer, revealing the shape, and I do a whole bunch of them, and I throw them right into the washing machine and the dryer, and it frees on all the cut edges. And it gives it a sense of texture and dimension that you can't get with regular patchwork. Once I've done that, then I trim it all down to the right size and make the quilt. Moonseed was one of my first. And if you notice, Peonies has pieces of moonseed in there. I had a lot left over, and so I cut them. Peonies is a little bit different than the rest because it's a little more of a designerly concept. I was looking out the window and I saw a peony sitting on my table with some cookbooks, and that was simply what the inspiration for that. But I really like the idea of using the leftover pieces. The other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all done the same way with that reverse applique. This one is called Vestige, and this is taken from the designs that I found when I was researching Tribal Rhythm series, which was looking at the designs from tribal indigenous peoples around the world. Some of them I've already passed on to customers. This is the black circles and the brown circles are made with suede cloth. The next one is called Circle Game, Ode to Kandinsky. And I tell the funny story is the time that I made this, I thought it was so clever of layering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different layers, cutting them and sewing them and washing them and making this quilt, thinking I was very clever. And I turned around, and there on the wall was a poster of Kandinsky's painting that looks sort of like this. So it's not an original design, so now it's Ode to Kandinsky. The next one is called Forest Floor. Those ferns are actually free-form. When I was sewing, I didn't draw them, I just sewed them so that they're very organic and no two are the same, because no two plants are the same. And the final two are done in the same technique, only with a stencil, so that each block is pretty similar to the next one. And when I'm working on these, I almost always work in a color scheme. Most of them are complementary colors, which means if I put red, I have to put green with it. It's an opposite thing. And what happens when you do that, you start getting a lot of vibration and excitement in the colors. The other thing that I also do is I make sure that if the design is light colored, it's on a back colored background, so you can see it. I remember years ago watching, I was at a quilt guild meeting, and a woman came into this spectacular quilt, it was huge, and had used all very pastel colors. You couldn't even see the design from across the room. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm always going to make sure that I have high contrast. So this is the group, and I continue to work this way. And it's all scrap quilts. I don't go and buy special fabric. I pick what I have in my stash and work in that way. I have a new commission coming up that are going to be doing the same kind of thing, only with their fabric instead of mine. That butcher work is from around 2009 to the current day. So I continue to work in this way because I find it really, it's almost like I don't have to think about it too much, and it's a really good way to keep busy at sewing, because as an artist, you can't just sit still. You gotta do something. And if I don't have anything in mind, I'll go back and use one of these. I've taught this class quite often in the region, and I have a ton of stencils, so I could probably make 10 more quilts, all different, in this way. You know what's an interesting thing is I find that these sell really, really well because they're such colorful, moving pieces. And I do want to say that everything that you see here except Caleb's quilt can be purchased. So don't hesitate and ask. I grew up on a dairy farm down near Binghamton, and I am still always taken with landscapes and fields and corn rows, all of that kind of stuff. And I try really hard to just look at and try to feel the emotion that I feel in looking at that, and I try to just be real minimal about the design so that I can focus on what it feels like for me to be there instead of showing you what the trees look like and showing you what the hills look like. This is what it feels like for me. So, and I've also started doing a lot more handwork. I'm working with thicker threads and putting in designs. So these two quilts right here are very minimal, and if you notice, almost void of color, almost the opposite of what you see over there. And the reason is because I was inspired by them in the winter. And there's very little color, we think, in winter. But if you really pay attention, there's these beautiful russet browns and these blues and the yellows of the cornfields. So there is never a lack for color, it's just much more subdued. This quilt is called Winter Cornfields. I absolutely love cornfields. I've been making cornfields quilts, probably for 25 years. I just love cornfields. There is something about the rhythm of a cornfield. As you're driving by them, you get that rhythmic feel to it all. And there is this sense of straight design. So this piece is as if I were looking at the hills, the cornfields from a distance and then to the forest. And all in here is all handwork. Just spent hours and hours and hours in front of the TV doing these loopy stitches to make it look like what happens in between the rows, you know, look at that stuff. This one, does anybody know where the Cedar Vale maple syrup place is on that road? There is a field just down the road from there on Pleasant Valley that the farmer has done an incredible job at making his fields every season spectacular. The designs are gorgeous. So one year I decided that I would have to make one. This is the corn stubble, And then of course there was some lines where the tractors went, and these were where the other parts of the field were. This is all handwork in here, and the rest is all machine quilted. This is called Pleasant Valley. I didn't have room for it, but the one on the far side is called Waves at Sunset. This is another example of playing with color, but on this one, I wanted to see what would happen if I added yarn here, so it's all couch down yarn. And in here, I have a felting machine that I felted roving in the middle, so it's fuzzy. This is a complete complementary color design. Any place there is blue, I put orange. Any place there's green, I put red. Any place there's blue-green, I put red-orange. It was a simple study in color and making the, you know what it looks like when the sunset and the sun is right at the horizon, you get that line. So again, a simple design and nothing that's really figurative so much as really playing with a design. This is one of my newer quilts. What I have decided, because I work so figuratively a lot, that I'm working toward trying to be very free with my designs and really making them not so tight. And you know, I get working and they turn tight every time. So this one, I had this just kind of a simple design, and I had this circle, off-centered circle with some dots, and that was all I started with. And as I was working, I said, well, these have to look like they're floating on the surface instead of sitting on there. So they all have a little bit of shadow, and these lines have shadow. And then this little guy is spinning and knocking all of his color off. This is called Fallout, and this one I made this year. Cone, that's the one that was they advertised. I was so happy to see that because it really reads well. I have been, for many, many years, photographing close-up things. And what I've been doing is I have been photographing the insides or the very close-up of very unusual plants, like flowers and plants. If you look at the real inside of a lily, you see those beautiful stamens just sticking up, and the background is all blurred. Well, I had a picture of a coneflower that was kind of mutated, and it was like only some of the leaves came out, one of the petals came out on one side. So I decided to try that. So what I did is I took the image, put it on my computer, projected it against the wall with a big piece of paper, and I just drew every line where there was a difference between the light, medium, or dark, and I just drew the lines. This is all machine pieced. This is not applique, this is machine pieced. Curve piecing is really kind of challenging if you're not used to doing it. I figured it out. It didn't work really well between here, so this is all piping, which makes it doubly hard. And then this is all the center of the coneflower, and that's all done with fused applique. One of the things that I have done over the years is I was what do I want to say? Kind of a commercial? No, I would go to art festivals, set up a tent, and put all my work in, but there's not room in a tent for big quilts, so I started developing smaller quilts. And they really were my bread and butter quilts. I had them in galleries and in my shows, and I teach how to do them, so they became kind of my bread and butter quilts. Instead of making a million pot holders, I went to something bigger. I made a lot of pot holders in my day. And during COVID, I made a ton of money in making masks. It's just crazy, you know, with all this great fabric. So anyway, so I started developing the whole idea of making a more realistic picture with fabric. I'm not a bad painter, and I'm really not a bad drawer. I just don't particularly like doing it too much, as I find it really kind of a little boring. So working with fabric gives me the ability to really engage in the process of making artwork, using my hands to make artwork. And so I've developed these panels. And I wanted to show you, the reason I put all of these up, I wanted to show you the oldest one. This was made in 2018 to the newest one, which was made last week. And you can see how they've developed. They've developed the In the beginning, it was really sticking strictly with the design of nature. The grasses, the flowers ended up being just circles. And I love them. They're easy to make. People ask me how long, I'm not telling. But they're quick. They're quick. But then somehow I started deciding that they needed to be more elaborate. So you'll start looking, the landscape is getting more elaborate here with the background. This is all thread painting. These trees are all thread painted back here. And then the foreground has more, these are actually tiny little pieces of fabric, these branches. And then I build the tree on top of it. And the tree, people ask about the tree, I start with maybe a branch of three main branches, and then I add little bits of fabric, and it's all done with a fusing applique. So for those that have never heard of it or don't know what it is, fusing is a type of glue that comes in a sheet that you iron, iron on the back of fabric. You know when you put a patch, you buy a patch and it's got something sticky, that's what fusing is. So I fuse all of my fabrics that I'm working with. I cut them with a little tiny rotary cutter to cut them the size I want, or scissors, and then I put them down and I iron them. And that once they're done, then I go in and I sew, quilt every single piece of fabric to keep it staying there. These are made like a collage. The background is usually one piece of fabric. I quilt it with a middle piece and a backing, and then I add the stuff on top of it. So it really is more like collage than it is quilting, but the stitching goes on every single piece to hold it down. The bottom three are a little bit earlier works. There's the top three are a little bit newer works. This one is made almost like mosaic. Tons and tons and tons of little pieces of fabric. They've all been fused. I love working this way. A couple years ago, I went on a trip to Montana with my partner to visit family. Not my family, but the family. And when I was there, they were planning a funeral of somebody I didn't know. And so I had all this time, so I got my camera and I walked around. We were on a farm and I took all these really great pictures. And one of the pictures I took was the front of this old rusted tractor. So I loved it. It had vines and stuff on it. So we took a piece of black sateen. It was somebody's blouse. And they were ready to send it to the rescue mission. I'm like, no. I want that. And what's really cool is black fabric, when you bleach it, most often get this beautiful orange color. So I wriggled it up like an accordion and I put some soft scrub with bleach on it so it wouldn't run, and let it sit there a minute, and I rinsed it out, and this is what I got. So I was actually in a workshop of working with handwork, and this particular artist uses a lot of clothing in her work. In fact, she's got a piece downstairs. Helen Gaglio, is that how you say it? Gaglio or something. And so this was the bodice of the shirt, and I put it on there. I'm like, I can't do that. So I started thinking about, this really looks more like mountains. And then I thought, oh, we have a nice reflection here. And this turquoise silky stuff. Now when you get up close to this, there are probably close to 5,000 French knots in there. It's all French knots from here all the way on across here, all on here, to kind of soften the edge. And then all of the black here is got handwork to make it wrinkly. So the whole idea of this quilt, and I'm going on and on about this particular one because the process went back and forth. I started with a close-up of the tractor. And then when I started this, I thought, this is what mountains look like when you're way back here. And I thought, how can I bring the eye back to that close-up idea? So therefore, I put in grasses here to make, to change the perspective. Now, these grasses are actual, stick with me people, this is complicated. There's this stuff called wash away stabilizer. If anybody's ever sewn clothes, you put that interfacing in the necks and stuff. It's the same kind of thing, only it dissolves. So you can sew on it, and then you can dissolve it, and then you have the sewing left over. It's really cool. So what I did is I went out and picked weeds, and I printed from my old printmaking days. I have a little etching press, and I printed weeds like this, and I put them in an embroidery hoop, and I free motion quilted the heck out of them. Dissolved the solvy stuff. Now I have these really cool grasses all by themselves, and those are hand sewn on here and here. So I felt like what I did is I started a little close up, then I moved it back, and then I brought it forward again. So the juxtaposition of perspective is what I get really excited about with this. I've also started working, up until these quilts, I have been working with strictly cottons. I know how to work with a cotton. I've been working with cottons for 40 plus years. I know what to do. I want to work with something different now. So over here, there's linen. Here there's silk. This is a silk fabric here. This is linen. And this, the background is linen. This is cotton sateen, and this is silk. So I'm really starting to play with the idea of putting different kind of fabrics together to really give it, there's something exciting about different fibers. I don't know what it does, but it does something very exciting. So I talked to you about the panels. I'm starting to explore the idea of going bigger with that whole idea. And I saw a design the other day that I really loved, and it was a piece of rebar going this way with a bunch of branches stuck on it. And I kind of like that idea. So I developed the idea of having, again, a perspective of a mountain way back here. This background, by the way, is all pieced. These bigger pieces I like, instead of one solid piece of fabric, I piece the background. It's all random. I don't have any plan for it except for I want the color to move. The color starts very pale and moves toward a darker green and a darker blue at the top. These are free cut trees. I just hand drew them. But this one and this one are mirror images, and this one and this one are mirror images. And the serendipity part of the whole thing is that some of them look just like the reflection, like these two look almost exactly the same, but they're not. And then these are they're falling leaves, I guess. It's called geomorphology. I like naming my things that people don't understand what they're called. So you have to look it up, okay, think about it, right? So geomorphology. And then the final one that I just finished yesterday was my heron quilt. This is the second heron quilt that I've made. The first one was a commission for my sister who lives in Florida. She needed a very narrow, long, skinny thing. And when I sent her to the designs, one of them had a little bird in it. She goes, oh, I really like herons. So the first one was a heron. It got such great reviews, and I missed it so much because it lives in Florida, that I made another one. Let me tell you the process of this. The whole background from start to finish is all pieced, starting with the blues, moving into the paler greens, moving into darker greens, moving into browns at the bottom. Once I get that done, then the whole thing is quilted. The whole thing, quilted. Then I start adding the cattails that are like in the distance. First I add those in. They're also done with that fusing. The grasses start going in. And I've discovered it's really important when you're making grasses to make them bend, because there's not one place I've ever looked at all the grasses are like that. They bend and they break, and they make a really great design. So, and I've discovered how to do that to make them look real. Then the bigger cattails go in, and then the guy gets made. Now I start working this guy on a piece of parchment paper because that fusing stuff doesn't stick to parchment. So I can design a bunch of it and iron it and stuff, and it's not going to stick. And then when I get a good portion of it up here done, then I attach it to the quilt, and then I start using free motion quilting to add the details. If you get up close, you'll see there's lots and lots and lots of stitching here. Even the little black thing in the eye is a piece of fabric. I build the heron by starting with the underbody, which is dark, and bigger feathers. Then I go in and give little lighter feathers, and then the last layer are the lightest feathers. And every feather is an individual piece cut of fabric, fused down and stitched down. There's probably about, right in this area, there's probably about 8-10 layers of fabric being stitched. So in my research, when I was looking at herons, I realized that they don't live just in the cattails, they live at the base of the cattail in the marsh, which is all these broken things. So I start putting in some of this stuff to give it a dimension and a depth to the piece. And then because I don't want to put his feet in, because I don't know how, I'm only kidding. I don't want, he's in the marsh. I start adding the leaves and flowers and finishing it up. And by the time I'm done, the whole thing is quilted. So I know a lot of times when we're making these kind of quilts, we make the top, we sandwich them, and then we quilt them. All of these here are all quilted all while I'm making the piece. I get done, I put the binding on, and I'm done.